Did you know microdosing medical cannabis can be a good way to avoid getting high? Today, we're going to teach you how to microdose medical cannabis. Hey everybody, welcome to Season 2. This is Microdosing Medical Cannabis. I'm here today with Blake Smith, bioanalytical chemist with Zion Medicinal, and Josh Fitzgerald, clinical pharmacist with Deseret Wellness. Josh, I'm really glad to have you here today to talk about microdosing. And essentially what Blake and I talk about is kind of low dosing. It seems like microdosing is just dosing without the psychoactivity, right? Is that kind of what we're talking about?
And we're talking about more of effects. We're trying to get to a point where you're not getting into the psychoactive part of it. We're going to, as you microdose, you're going to slowly ramp up the dosing to avoid that effect and kind of pinpoint those breakpoints of where you get the sedation part and the psychoactive part.
The sedation and the psychoactive part.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, that's what we're working on kind of defining this microdosing thing. Blake, what's happening? When we talk about this low dosing or microdosing cannabis, what's happening to not get the psychoactivity in those products you're making?
So when we think about this, we're thinking about dose effects, right? How much do I have to take in order to get the effect that I want? But what ends up happening is if you take too much, you can overstimulate, the different receptors. And when you overstimulate, this is when you start having more psychoactivity. This is where if you're having larger molecular compounds, your body's response to that will be a sedation response to try and sleep it off or to dilute, right? And so really, I love what was just said, because what we're really talking about is how do I alleviate pain, but not overstimulate all my receptors?
Right. We're not just taking it to take it. Right? What do you talk about with patients, Josh, when they come in and they say, look, I'm a new medical cannabis patient, right? I don't want to get high. How do you start that conversation?
So we talk about microdosing to begin with. So we talk about, what are your endpoints? Are we treating pain? Are we treating anxiety? Are we treating, inflammation? We're trying to work up to a point where we can control that dosing and meet that end goal that they want, whether it's pain relief or anxiety relief, without tipping into some of those psychoactive parts of it. So we're going to start at a very low dose, what we call microdosing, and then you slowly ramp up that dose over time to pinpoint and find the dose that works well and best for them.
One thing that's really important about this to think about is specifically around what was just said. So if you're taking it for pain, for example, and let's to simplify this, let's say you have 10 dopamine receptors, okay? And what you're trying to do is take the edge off. You're trying to alleviate pain. You're trying to, or if it's anxiety, whatever we're looking at, okay? If you were to immediately fill all of those receptors, you're going to end up having an anxiety reaction more than anything else. So this is why a lot of times people will have the single piece of chocolate and not eat all the chocolate bar in front of you or whatever that looks like, because you actually still get an effect even from that. You'll actually stimulate your dopamine from eating chocolate, or there's other activities that will do that too. But you don't typically do so much that you've completely railroaded your system.
Yeah, it's the same thing about
activating.
The chocolate bar. You're going to eat that whole chocolate bar. You're going to end up getting sick. It's the same thing with cannabis, right? We're just going to eat enough that we feel better, but we're still able to do the things that we want to do. What does that look like from a dosing perspective, Josh, how much THC is too much?
Yeah, that just depends on the person, really. And we talk about that with the patient when they come in, identifying these breakpoints, but starting at a low dose, like I talked about before, and slowly increasing that dose day by day and getting to the point where they can feel and understand how it's reacting inside their body and getting the effect that they need. So we started a low dose, and then the next time we go to dose again, we increase it just a little bit more, and we slowly titrate up to that working dose that's going to be beneficial to the patient. So we started at an edible, we're going to start at 2.5 milligrams probably.
Okay,
and
that's what I was kind of getting at, this question of what's the milligram dose? Is it, and really it's 2 to 3 milligrams?
Usually, yeah. So we try to start patients off with 2.5 or 2 milligrams, depending on what's available. And then, we talk about increasing that dose. Now, microdosing doesn't just, go to a specific 10 milligram range. It just depends on where the patient is at. Working that dose up to where they can get the effect that they need to treat whatever they're being needed to treat for.
Got it.
And typically speaking, if you're not an experienced cannabis user, it doesn't take a lot of cannabis to start activating the system. Because when we think about endocannabinoid receptor system 1, we're talking about the synaptic metabolism of cannabinoids. And so really what you're trying to do is stimulate as those neurotransmitters move across the synapse, right? And then they get absorbed on the other side. It sends an electrochemical signal throughout the whole body. And that happens about the speed of an electron. So it's really fast. So, you do an inhalation method, you immediately will start feeling an effect within probably within a minute, really. And so what will happen is if you have the right microdose, a little tiny bit, you'll have a whole systemic effect across the whole body very, very quickly. Versus, if you do a whole bunch initially, you'll max out what that signaling pathway is. And then also you'll start having these negative effects. And so where is that right dose?
Yeah, and that's what we aim for. In any medicinal field, and using cannabis, we're aiming to the effect that the patient needs to alleviate their problem. And that's what we're aiming for.
You bring up a really good point there, and that is a medical program, right? So there's a lot of talk about microdosing with patients in a medical program, but not so much in a adult use or a recreational program. So I think, this discussion is definitely more suited to those patients who want to find a medical benefit versus a therapeutic or an adult use dose where you just want to get high or you want to have that therapeutic dose. Watch us. We have another video about the side effects and the effects of medical cannabis. That's more for therapeutic dosing. This discussion is much more medical. I like this because in Utah, and especially here, like at Deseret Wellness, you guys are really focused on keeping the dose as low as you can and still getting the lowest effective dose, you call it.
Mm-hmm.
Are there products that you tend to start with or that you like, Josh, that are better for microdosing or low dosing?
Yeah. Tinctures are probably the easiest way to microdose in the beginning because there's so much control over each drop that you give. We can start at, sometimes I tell people start at 3 drops. If that doesn't work, then the next time you go to use it, go to 4 drops and go to 5 drops. And you can really, fine tune that drop and the amount of drops that you get to really dial into the effect that you need to help you in each circumstance. I talk about with some of my patients that we can get to a point where we're going to get the maximum amount of pain relief at around 5 drops of, say, a 1 to 5 tincture. But if we go to 6 drops, we get the sedation part of it. And so we can pinpoint those areas for each specific patient to get the pain relief from it, but then maybe add in a little bit of sedation to it too, to help in their effect to maybe sleep at night. So we can definitely adjust that dosing with drops.
So Tim, this is a medical program, but in terms of the state of Utah. But I will say this, there's value in microdosing even on the recreational side or on the adult use side, because you should know what your tolerance levels are regardless. So in the case of a medical program, you're trying to alleviate a specific symptom like pain or sleep or anxiety or whatever that is. For an adult use, you're trying to get high. That's the effect you're going for. But there's a difference between I feel really good and I'm focused on the now versus I'm blitzed and I'm out for the weekend, right? Yeah. And so you should really understand, no matter where you're approaching this, what your tolerance ranges are anyway, because what is the effect that you're trying to get? Am I trying to just, have a little bit head change, or am I really trying to,
and that's where I think the medicinal market really shines, because we teach our patients this as they're starting as new patients. We teach them these breakpoints and how they need to kind of feel how their body's, reacting to each dose. And so once they get an understanding of it, they can really expound their usage of it and be able to pinpoint specific things with it. So
it's like you're learning how to dose. But then because you know what the dosing looks like or what that feels like to you, let's say 8 milligrams is kind of my breaking point. Anything over that, I get a little more psychoactivity. I'm not focused on my work. But as a patient, if I stay under that, say 3 or 4 milligrams of THC, that's kind of the sweet spot for me, where you have this, you feel a little better. You're able to do the things you want to do, but you're not too high to have those.
And that's freedom
effects.
for a lot of people to be able to, know that dose and be able to take that dose and go to work and function normally and keep that pain or anxiety or whatever the symptom is under control. That's freedom.
Yeah, I agree. The last thing I would say about this, is that once you sort of find your right dose, this is where you have another conversation with your QMP. This is a conversation you have with your pharmacist. And really, when we think about medicine, if you go in for a knee operation or something like this, you have a care team. You have a group of physicians and people who are trying to take care of you. Cannabis is no different. You should have a care team. You should have your pharmacist, your QMP, or your general practitioner if they're the one who's prescribing for you, or whatever that looks like. And you should be working with those individuals to find the right medicine and the right dosing for you. And once you do that, it's kind of an awesome thing.
It is very awesome. We see a lot of people that benefit greatly from that. Yes.
Cool. Before we end this, if you want to know more about like finding your just right dose, we actually have at utahmarijuana.org dosing guides and a just right dosing guide to try to help patients find what that dose looks like, build up a little tolerance so that you can understand where that happens. You know what's next that I really want to get to talk about later probably is the cannabinoids and microdosing different cannabinoids. As you're developing products, we'll have to do another video on what that looks like, CBG, CBN, and that sort of stuff, and how to dose those different cannabinoids. Thanks for watching. This is Discover Marijuana. I'm Tim Pickett, medical cannabis expert, provider here in Utah, Blake Smith, a bioanalytical chemist, and Josh Fitzgerald, pharmacist at Deseret Wellness. So if you have a comment or you want to join the conversation about microdosing and you have an experience with microdosing, be sure to comment below. We love to hear your stories. Also, be sure to tune in because our next video is about side effects of marijuana and therapeutic effects and those higher doses of THC.